In the early 1990s, hospitals across Alabama and Georgia were filled with fear. Not because of a new disease, but because of a man wearing scrubs, a nurse who was supposed to save lives, yet might have taken dozens. His name was Joseph Dewey Akin, and behind his calm face hid something dark and uncontrollable, an obsession with death. Colleagues called him a perfectionist, a top-notch nurse who could handle pressure better than anyone. But they didn't know that he may have been the one creating that pressure, by causing the very emergencies he was so good at handling. Akin worked in intensive care units where lives often hung by a thread. He thrived in chaos, loved the adrenaline, the flashing monitors, and the shout that echoed through hospital corridors, Code Blue. To most nurses, that sound meant panic. To Akin, it was a thrill. Some said he got a rush from watching a patient's heart stop, just so he could be the hero trying to save them. Others believed he simply enjoyed the godlike power of deciding who would live and who would die. Between 1990 and 1991, strange things began happening in hospitals around Alabama and Georgia. At North Fulton Regional Hospital in Roswell, Georgia, the number of Code Blue emergencies skyrocketed. Normally, there were 2 or 3 per month. But in the 6 months Akin worked there were 32. And 22 of those happened while he was on duty. When someone graphed the data, it stood out like a mountain. Something wasn't right. Other nurses began whispering. They noticed drugs missing from the crash carts, medications that could stop a heart instantly if injected improperly. Among them was lidocaine, a drug used to stabilize heart rhythms, but deadly in the wrong dose. Soon after, Akin was fired from North Fulton for unrelated reasons, officially for falsifying his credentials. He claimed to have a 4-year nursing degree when he didn't. But some suspected that the real reason was far darker. After leaving Georgia, Akin found work in Alabama, at Cooper Green Hospital in Birmingham. There, in 1991, a quadriplegic patient named Robert J. Price, age 32, suddenly went into cardiac arrest and died. His assigned nurse, Marian Albright, returned from lunch to find Akin leaving Price's room. When she tried to enter, Akin allegedly tried to stop her. When she finally got inside, Price was already crashing. Later, an autopsy revealed an amount of lidocaine twice the lethal dose and 4 times the normal therapeutic level. When investigators dug deeper, they found a disturbing pattern. Over the past decade, Akin had worked in at least 20 different medical facilities across Alabama and Georgia. Each time, he left behind a trail of suspicious deaths. Some investigators estimated that he might have been connected to as many as 100 deaths. Yet hospitals were reluctant to investigate, afraid of lawsuits, bad publicity, and the nightmare of admitting they'd hired a killer. In 1992, Akin was charged with the murder of Robert Price. The case became national news. The media nicknamed him Code Blue Junkie, a nurse addicted not to drugs, but to the thrill of resuscitation. During the trial, prosecutors argued that Akin poisoned his patients with lidocaine, then enjoyed the chaos that followed. Defense attorneys, however, claimed it was all a tragic misunderstanding, that the lidocaine was administered during a desperate attempt to revive Price, not to kill him. Akin's lawyer insisted that Price had died of natural causes, and that Akin was being targeted because he was openly gay and had clashed with co-workers. He portrayed the case as a witch hunt, fueled by rumors and hysteria. But the evidence was strong: the lethal dosage, the eyewitness testimony, the pattern of suspicious deaths. After a short deliberation, the jury found Akin guilty of murder. However, the story didn't end there. The conviction was overturned on appeal after it was revealed that one juror had said she believed Akin was guilty before the trial even began. A retrial followed in 1997, but the jury couldn't reach a verdict. Some believed he was guilty beyond doubt. Others thought there wasn't enough hard proof. The case was declared a mistrial. By early 1998, a third trial was scheduled. Facing the possibility of another conviction and a life sentence, Akin finally accepted a deal. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter and received a 15-year sentence. With time already served, he could be eligible for parole after only a few years. But justice didn't feel complete. In Georgia, investigators reopened the files on the mysterious deaths at North Fulton Hospital and other facilities where Akin had worked. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation found shocking data: a spike in patient deaths, missing medication vials, and consistent eyewitness patterns pointing back to Akin. Yet no new charges were filed. The cases were complicated. Many of the patients had been old, sick, or terminal. It was nearly impossible to prove beyond doubt that they'd been murdered and not just victims of natural decline. Colleagues described Akin as brilliant but arrogant, a man who loved being the center of attention, especially during emergencies. One attorney who investigated the case said the data on the hospital's code blues looked like a mountain rising out of flatland. When you graphed it, he said, it stuck up like Mount Everest. When police searched Akin's home, they found a vial of epinephrine, another drug missing from hospital crash carts. In proper doses, epinephrine saves lives. In excessive doses, it can stop the heart. The discovery deepened suspicions but still wasn't enough for a murder conviction. Akin's name was linked to at least 17 suspicious deaths at North Fulton Hospital alone. Civil lawsuits followed. Families of the deceased demanded answers. 10 lawsuits were eventually settled, with Akin's insurance company and the hospital paying over $1 million in damages. One of the settlements went to the family of a young girl left permanently brain damaged after a suspicious code blew under Akin's watch. Despite the mounting evidence, Akin's lawyer continued to call it all a witch hunt. He argued that Akin had been targeted because he was a white gay man working with mostly black nurses in the South during the early 1990s, a time and place not known for tolerance. Some colleagues admitted that Akin was disliked, but they insisted it was because of his arrogance, not his sexuality. Meanwhile, many of his former co-workers couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister had happened in those hospitals. They remembered the nights when healthy patients suddenly crashed. They remembered the look on Akin's face during each code blue, not panic but excitement. After his conviction was reduced to manslaughter, Akin served several years in an Alabama prison. He maintained his innocence until the end, claiming he had been wrongly accused and that his only crime was caring too much about his patients. But for many of the families who lost loved ones, his words meant nothing. They believed he was a killer, one who had hidden behind a nurse's badge. When reporters later asked if Akin's name had been cleared in Georgia, authorities gave a chilling answer: the case is not closed until the district attorney tells us it's closed. In other words, it never really was. Cases like Joseph Akin's are extremely difficult to prosecute. In hospitals, patients are already vulnerable. When they die unexpectedly, it's easy to blame their illness, not foul play. Unless someone catches the killer in the act, the evidence often disappears with the body. The only witnesses are usually the nurse and the patient, and one of them isn't talking. Some experts believe Akin may have been what's known as an angel of death. Medical professionals who create crises to feel powerful or heroic, or who develop a psychological addiction to the adrenaline of saving lives. Others think he was simply a narcissist who liked to prove he was smarter than everyone else in the room, even if it meant risking lives. By the time his case faded from headlines, many of the witnesses were old, sick, or dead. The files grew cold, and Akin's name slowly disappeared from public memory. But the shadow of what he might have done still haunts the hospitals of Alabama and Georgia. Did Joseph Dewey Akin really kill dozens of patients just to satisfy a twisted need for control? Or was he simply a scapegoat caught in a storm of rumors, fear, and prejudice? We may never know for sure. But one thing is certain: when a nurse loves the sound of a code blue more than the silence of a healed patient, something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. And if you thought this story was disturbing, just wait for what's coming next. Subscribe for more shocking facts that will make you question everything.